The suitcase looked innocent enough. Standard black luggage with worn corners and faded airline tags. But as Ranger circled it for the third time, his growls growing deeper with each pass, Officer David Chen realized they weren't dealing with a typical drug case. The way Ranger's ears pinned back and his hackles rose meant only one thing. Whatever was inside that bag was far more dangerous than cocaine. Terminal 3 of Chicago O. Hare International Airport buzzed with its usual afternoon chaos. Travelers hurried past with rolling suitcases, children whined about delayed flights, and the constant hum of announcements echoed through the vast space. But in the corner near Gate 12, a different kind of tension was building. David had been working with K-9 units for 8 years, but Ranger was something special. The Belgian Malinois had an instinct that went beyond training, beyond protocol. In their 3 years together, Ranger had never been wrong about a threat. Not once. "What is it, boy?" David whispered, crouching down beside his partner. Ranger's brown eyes were locked on the suitcase, his body trembling with barely contained energy. The dog's nose twitched frantically, processing scents that human noses couldn't detect. The bag belonged to Maria Santos, a middle-aged woman who sat nervously at Gate 12, clutching her boarding pass. Flight 447 to Miami was boarding in 20 minutes, and she kept glancing at the departure board with increasing anxiety. When David approached her earlier for routine questioning, she had seemed cooperative enough, but there was something in her eyes, a flicker of panic that experienced officers learned to recognize. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from your luggage," David said, his voice calm but firm. Maria's face went pale as she watched Ranger's behavior intensify. "I don't understand," she stammered, her accent thick with stress. "Is there a problem with my bag?" David didn't answer immediately. He was watching Ranger, who had now backed away from the suitcase and was staring at it with an expression David had never seen before. It wasn't the focused alertness of a drug detection. This was something else entirely. The dog was afraid. "Ranger, what's wrong?" David muttered under his breath. In all their time together, he had never seen his partner show fear. Ranger had faced down armed suspects, searched burning buildings, and worked in war zones during David's military deployment. Fear wasn't in the dog's vocabulary. A small crowd had begun to gather, passengers craning their necks to see what was happening. David quickly radioed for backup, his gut telling him this situation was about to escalate beyond a simple drug bust. "This is Chen at Gate 12. Terminal 3, I need additional units and possibly EOD. He spoke into his radio, using the code for explosive ordnance disposal. If Ranger was reacting this strongly, David wasn't taking any chances. Maria Santos overheard the radio call and her knees buckled. No, you don't understand," she pleaded, reaching toward her suitcase. "Please, I need to catch this flight." "My daughter. She's in the hospital." David gently but firmly guided her away from the luggage. "Ma'am, I need you to remain calm and step back." "We're going to sort this out." But Ranger wasn't calming down. If anything, his agitation was increasing. The dog began pacing in a tight circle around the suitcase, whimpering, a sound David had never heard from him before. Other passengers in the boarding area were starting to notice the commotion, and David could see gate agents speaking urgently into their phones. Within minutes, backup arrived. Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, David's supervisor, approached with 2 additional officers. Behind them came the bomb squad, their heavy equipment cases creating an ominous atmosphere in the terminal. "What's the situation?" Rodriguez asked, his eyes immediately going to Ranger's unusual behavior. "Routine drug sweep turned into something else," David explained. "Ranger's acting like he's detected explosives, but his behavior is different. I've never seen him like this." Rodriguez studied the dog for a moment. He had worked with K-9 units for 15 years and had learned to trust their instincts above all else. "Clear the area," he ordered. "Get everyone back 50 feet. As gate agents began the delicate process of moving passengers without causing panic, David stayed close to Ranger. The dog had stopped pacing but remained focused on the suitcase, his body rigid with tension. "Talk to me about the owner," Rodriguez said quietly. "Maria Santos, 52, traveling alone to Miami, says her daughter is in the hospital. seemed nervous but cooperative until Ranger started reacting. Rodriguez glanced over at Maria, who was now crying softly as an officer questioned her at a safe distance. Family emergency could explain the nervousness, but not your dog's behavior. The bomb squad technician, a veteran named Tom Walsh, approached with his equipment. "What are we looking at?" he asked, setting down his gear. "Possible explosive device," David replied. "But my partner's reaction is unlike anything I've trained for." Walsh studied Ranger for a moment. "Dogs can detect things we can't," he said thoughtfully. "Sometimes they pick up on chemical combinations or traces that our equipment misses." He began unpacking his scanning device. "Let's see what we're dealing with." As Walsh worked, David noticed something else troubling. Ranger had begun backing away from the suitcase, but his eyes never left it. The dog's retreat wasn't strategic. It was instinctive, as if he sensed imminent danger. "Tom," David called out urgently, "maybe we should increase the clearance area." Walsh looked up from his scanner, about to respond, when the device in his hands began beeping rapidly. His expression changed instantly from professional caution to alarm. "Everyone back! Now!" Walsh shouted, dropping his equipment and sprinting away from the suitcase. "We've got an active device." The terminal erupted into controlled chaos as officers rushed to evacuate the remaining passengers. But David couldn't move. Ranger had done something unprecedented. The dog had placed himself between the suitcase and the crowd of evacuating people, as if using his own body as a shield. "Ranger, come!" David commanded, but the dog refused to budge. The Belgian Malinois stood firm, his hackles raised, staring down the threat in the suitcase as if he could will it to stay dormant through sheer determination. David's heart raced as he realized what his partner was doing. Ranger wasn't just detecting danger, he was protecting everyone in the terminal, even at the cost of his own safety. "Ranger!" David called again, but his voice was drowned out by the wailing of emergency sirens as more units arrived. The terminal was being evacuated. Flights were being diverted, and somewhere in the distance, David could hear the bomb squad coordinator shouting orders into his radio. Walsh had retreated to a safe distance and was setting up his remote scanning equipment. "The device is active," he called out, "but something's wrong. The readings don't match any known explosive signature." David felt a chill run down his spine. If the bomb squad couldn't identify the device, they couldn't predict how it would behave. And Ranger was still standing guard over it, refusing to abandon his post. "I'm going to get my dog," David announced, starting toward Ranger. "Negative." Rodriguez grabbed his arm. "Chen, you're not approaching that device. That's an order." But even as they argued, something was happening with the suitcase. A faint hissing sound had begun, barely audible over the chaos of the evacuation. Ranger's ears perked up at the sound, and his whimpering intensified. Walsh, monitoring his equipment from a safe distance, suddenly went rigid. "Oh, God," he whispered, loud enough for the others to hear. "It's not a bomb." "What?" Rodriguez demanded. "It's biological," Walsh said, his voice tight with horror. "The readings indicate a containment breach. Something's leaking." The implications hit everyone at once. A biological weapon in one of the world's busiest airports could cause a pandemic. But Ranger had known. Somehow, the dog had detected not explosives, but a biological agent, and he had positioned himself to contain it. David felt a surge of pride mixed with terror. His partner wasn't just a drug detection dog. Ranger had somehow evolved into something more, a guardian with instincts that defied explanation. "We need hazmat teams." Rodriguez was shouting into his radio. "Full biological containment protocol, now." As emergency teams in protective suits began arriving, David watched his partner maintain his vigil. Ranger hadn't moved, hadn't wavered despite the chaos erupting around him. The dog seemed to understand the gravity of the situation better than any human in the terminal. Maria Santos, now in custody and being questioned intensively, had broken down completely. Through her tears, the truth was finally emerging. She wasn't a terrorist. She was a desperate mother who had been coerced into carrying the device. Her daughter was indeed in a Miami hospital, but not for illness. She was being held hostage. "They said it was just surveillance equipment," Maria sobbed to the FBI agents who had arrived on scene. "They said if I didn't carry it, they would kill Elena. I never knew. I never thought—" But the device wasn't surveillance equipment. Early analysis suggested it contained a strain of engineered bacteria that could cause widespread illness if released into the air circulation system of the airport. The people behind this plot had planned to use Maria as an unwitting carrier, knowing that a grieving mother traveling to see her sick daughter would arouse little suspicion. As hazmat specialists worked to contain the device, David remained focused on Ranger. The dog had been standing guard for over an hour now, and David could see the strain in his partner's posture. But Ranger refused to move until the threat was neutralized. "Your dog saved thousands of lives today," Walsh said, approaching David as the containment operation continued. If that device had been opened in the plane's cargo hold, or if it had leaked more extensively in the terminal. David nodded, unable to speak. He watched as the hazmat team carefully approached the suitcase, their protective suits making them look like astronauts. Even they seemed wary of getting too close, respecting Ranger's assessment of the danger. Finally, after what felt like hours, the device was secured in a specialized containment unit. Only then did Ranger finally relax, his tail wagging slightly as he trotted back to David's side. "Good boy," David whispered, scratching behind Ranger's ears. "Good boy." As the terminal slowly returned to normal operations, David received word that the FBI had located and rescued Maria's daughter. The terrorist cell responsible for the plot was being dismantled, and Maria would likely receive immunity in exchange for her cooperation. But none of that mattered to David as much as the dog sitting faithfully beside him. Ranger had somehow detected a threat that even sophisticated equipment had initially missed. The dog's instincts had prevented what could have been one of the worst bioterrorism attacks in history. Rodriguez approached them as the last of the emergency equipment was being packed away. "Chen, I don't know how to write this report," he said, shaking his head. "A drug dog detecting biological weapons? The brass is never going to believe it." David smiled, looking down at Ranger, who seemed completely unfazed by the attention he was receiving from other officers and federal agents. "Maybe Ranger's just better at his job than we thought." As they walked through the terminal, now bustling again with normal airport activity, David reflected on the day's events. Passengers hurried past them, oblivious to how close they had come to disaster. But David would never forget the sight of his partner standing guard over a device that could have killed thousands, refusing to back down even when faced with an unknown threat. The bond between a handler and his K-9 partner was supposed to be about trust, training, and teamwork. But what Ranger had shown today went beyond any of that. It was instinct, loyalty, and courage that couldn't be taught in any academy. That evening, as David filled out the incident reports, Ranger slept peacefully at his feet. The dog seemed to understand that his work was done, that the threat had been neutralized. But David knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, new threats, and he was grateful to have a partner whose instincts he could trust completely. The airport returned to its normal rhythm. Flights took off and landed on schedule, and travelers continued their journeys unaware of the drama that had unfolded in Terminal 3. But for David Chen and Ranger, this day would serve as a reminder of why their work mattered, and why the bond between them was stronger than any protocol or procedure. In the official reports, Ranger would be credited with detecting and helping to neutralize a biological weapon. But David knew the truth was more complex. His partner hadn't just detected a threat. Ranger had somehow understood the scope of the danger and had chosen to protect innocent people at the risk of his own life. As David drove home that night, Ranger riding shotgun as always, he couldn't help but wonder what other threats his partner might detect in the future. The world was becoming increasingly dangerous, but as long as he had Ranger by his side, David felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The badge on David's uniform read K-9 Unit, but after today, he knew it represented something more than just law enforcement. It represented the unbreakable bond between human and animal, the kind of partnership that could save lives and prevent disasters that most people would never even know about. Ranger stirred in the passenger seat, his ear twitching at some sound only he could hear. David smiled, knowing that his partner was always alert, always ready to serve and protect. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but they would face them together, just as they always had.